Let's give it a go. Ed, you help me with sound here at church. What's your goal when you're doing sound at church? What's your aim?
I think the main goal I have is actually to be pretty much invisible in a church environment. I mean, if people are noticing you, there's something wrong in my view. But actually the other key thing really with a church environment is you are helping people to hear the word of God better and to worship God better. And that's the key thing to remain focused on. So for my money, it's worth trying to do it as well as possible. I mean, the band is rehearsing, the singers are probably trying to be better singers. And then you've got people writing sermons, they're spending a lot of time writing those sermons and thinking about what they're saying. It would kind of be a shame if the sound person thought, well, this is just something I can just throw out and not really bother about.
Yep.
Well, I feel it's worth learning some craft and the art of it and trying to make the best of what you've got and keep learning, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so helpful, yeah. How do you try and achieve that goal? Is there anything in particular you're trying to do?
Well, with sound, the key thing is to listen. I mean, that sounds like a stupid thing to say, but actually it's surprising how many people don't actually do it. They think that sort of sound at the back of the church, I think the worst expression I hear, apologies if it offends anybody, is twiddling the knobs at the back. Because if you're doing that, actually you're not doing what you need to primarily do, which is to listen and to really hear what the congregation's getting, because they're what the people you're trying to reach.
Yes.
And you should be able to hear what they're hearing, walk around, absorb the atmosphere, really get a sense of what they're getting, and that is really the key.
So it's a big goal, trying to help people to hear the word of God and to worship God. Explain a bit of the nuts and bolts then. How exactly can you get that to happen better?
Well, this is where I'm at, which is I think the key thing is I need to pay attention, because it's quite easy to sort of dial out and defocus and think, oh, it's okay, and I'll just troll along with that. But actually what you need to do is maintain the focus of really listening all the time. I personally walk around a little bit, particularly the back of this church, really to see what are people hearing. Does it feel good? And ideally walking out of the door and walking back in again and thinking, if I walked in right now, would I want to be joining in? Would it be drawing me into a place where I would be worshipping or listening to what's being said? So that's sort of pretty key for me, really.
So when you're doing sound at church, there's a difference between doing speech and doing music. How do you see the difference between those two things?
Well, there's a big difference. I mean, the key thing is obviously that speech is usually quieter than the music, so there's quite a big disparity between the two, depending on what sort of church you're in. But I think with speech, the key thing is sort of, for my money, is intelligibility and naturalness of speech, because sometimes people want to egg it up and make it sound very sort of conferencey or commercial. And I think that's quite fatiguing over time. I personally prefer it where it sounds fairly natural, but it's got clarity in it, because you're trying to reach people who may have great young hearing or actually have quite impaired hearing. So you want to reach everybody. And I think with music, it's actually to work with the band, for them to feel confident, really to take away the sort of veil in between the band and the congregation, so they feel part of the music that's coming out. And the whole thing makes a sort of an amalgam of the worship band feeding to the congregation, back to the worship band. So you get a kind of lovely fusion of the two.
Yeah, if I'm playing in a band and you're doing sound, it's very much like we're both in the band together, isn't it? We're on the same team, trying to achieve the same goal, aren't we?
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. It should be a collaboration.
So you've done sound at church for quite a long while, at different churches as well. What kind of common problems do you face when you're doing it?
The key thing is maintaining speech intelligibility. And for that, really, ideally, you have a microphone at the right distance and you only have one microphone open at a time. And that is the thing that can be quite difficult to arrange, particularly if you've got a number of people who are going to be speaking or even interacting with each other, where you're trying to juggle a number of mics moving around. That then gets to be quite tricky.
Here at church, we found using the automatic mic mixer on this desk has really helped kind of solve some of those problems and help us to achieve the goal. How have you found using it?
Well, I found it a real game changer in certain circumstances, because the automatic mic mixer, in this case, we've got an Allen Heath SQ5 mixer, so it's called an AMM. It's sort of called different names in different mixers. On speech channels only, what it can very cleverly do is effectively sort of gain share between those mics. So it allows the volume to move up and down against the mics, but it's got a very clever sort of algorithm that can sort of target speech, and there's usually a filter built in as well, so you can help to find the speech. what happens is essentially that you can have 3, 4, 5, 10 mics open in a really echoey environment. People can chip in as they go along, but you can essentially leave all the volumes up similarly, and yet this gain sharing algorithm will just race around, and every time somebody speaks, it will find their voice. And it mostly sounds like one microphone is open the whole time. Now, you don't have to be sort of frantically trying to whiz faders up and down doing line mixing. You can actually just focus on what people are saying. And then I usually just take out faders where I know people are definitely not speaking. It's actually great. It maintains the natural flow of the conversation. I think it really adds to the whole flavour of the thing. But the most important thing is you're benefiting the congregation or your subsequent recordings or your online streaming with audio, because you're getting much cleaner audio right across the board.
So you found the automatic mic mixer really helpful. Why would you recommend it to others if they were trying to make sound better at church?
I think one of the key things actually, it makes you sound like a much better sound engineer than you actually be, because you're always on your game and you're always on the right mics. It keeps the sound of the reverberating sound going to the speakers and coming back to the speaker again. It keeps that to an absolute minimum by effectively sounding like one microphone all the time.
Nice. So it's making you sound like a much better audio engineer. I mean, you're already a really good one already, so it's making you sound better, you say. Do you think one day we'll get to the point where actually robots are going to completely replace people like you, and we'll just be able to turn the desk on and church will sound great? Is that where we'll get to?
It's a really interesting question. I think some people believe that's what a digital mixer would do for them until they discover it's a little bit more work than that. But it's a really interesting question, because what is the difference between us and a robot? Because, I mean, obviously a lot of what we have in digital mixing now effectively is doing automatic stuff, processing audio, handling microphones with automatic mic mixers potentially. There's quite a lot that's going on actually in the sort of digital realm, but it's being set up hopefully by a skilled pair of ears to start with and monitored by a good set of ears. But I think also the most important thing, which is like, could you replace a worship leader with a robot, which is, you probably could get something that would actually sound quite good, I suspect, in the future, but it doesn't have the heart, the spirit, all of those connection points with the material. And that's really what you want, which is you want somebody that's really listening and responding to the word, to the music, to the whole vibe, to the congregation. You want somebody that's fully engaged. Now, obviously, something that's non-sentient is presumably not able to do that. But in terms of handling certain aspects of, dynamics and of sort of the overall shaping of the sound and getting there quicker than a human can get there, actually, that's, I think, where the artificial intelligence can really come in, actually.
I mean, church is a people thing, isn't it? We have people coming into church to hear from God and to respond to Him in worship. We have people up the front who are helping us as we do that. We have people behind the sound desk to help us to do that.
Exactly.
It just kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
You could now create an electronic computerized singer that would be quite good. I suspect you could do it. I'm sure somebody's done it. But I think the thing is, it still wouldn't be the same as a responsive, living, breathing, life-experiencing singer who's responding to a congregation and to God's word and church. And I think that probably is going to be the difference.
Thanks so much, Ed. Thanks for having a chat with me about this. I think it's a really useful tool for churches to look into, at least know about.
You're welcome. Thank you.